couple of weeks ago, I had someone in the comment section of a video ask me to go take a look at this video on libertarian socialism. Sure, whatever you want. And it looks like this is another one of those gotcha videos that I've seen a couple of political ideologies try that exist to send people to so they can school you in their ideological message. Regardless, I don't care. I'm game. What the hell? So let's take a look at the stupidity that is libertarian socialism, shall we?
Hi there.
Well, hi there. Nice to meet you.
You've been linked to this video because you've claimed that libertarian socialism is an oxymoron.
No, prior to being linked to this video by a subscriber, I'd never even heard of libertarian socialism. But truth be told, I'm neither a fan of libertarianism nor socialism, so I kind of doubt my reaction will be positive.
It's understandable why you might take this position, because when these terms are used in mainstream political discourse, they are in fact conflicting.
Sorry, I just find both modern libertarianism and socialism to be totally ridiculous ideas, and I don't think they're any less ridiculous because you're about to spin a yarn.
However, libertarian socialists aren't using these terms in the same way that they're used in mainstream politics. Rather, we have our own definitions of libertarianism and socialism that are separate from the mainstream and not contradictory.
In other words, you're using them wrong. Now, I'm not going to argue over who gets to use what words. I will just repeat what I've said many times in the past, that the central purpose of language is to convey ideas to other people. If your use of language does not accurately convey ideas to other people, you're using language wrong. Knock it off.
Thus, the notion that libertarian socialism is an oxymoron is a common misconception.
No, it's not a misconception. The idea that you get to redefine words at your leisure because it makes you feel good is a common misconception.
Here's why. In mainstream politics, the word socialism generally has two meanings. First of all, it's often used to describe social democratic policies, where the government uses taxation to fund state-managed welfare programs and industries, such as the NHS, public broadcasting, social security, disability benefits, and so on. Secondly, the word socialism is also used to refer to Marxist-Leninist states, in which all of the industry in a given country is controlled by the state. Examples of this would be the USSR, Cuba, and Maoist China, etc.
Well, it also means, if you bother to look at the dictionary, a political and economic theory of social organization that advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. And it's funny you leave that definition out.
Both of these definitions of socialism refer to varying degrees of state management of the economy. In American political discourse, the word libertarian refers to right-wing advocates of laissez-faire free market capitalism. In America, libertarians are people who, to varying degrees, oppose the state playing a role in the management of the economy and instead advocate the privatization of state-owned services, in which industries are controlled by private corporations and goods and services are exchanged for profit in a market system.
Which is largely why I oppose strict libertarianism, because a completely free market doesn't work, any more than a completely socialist one does. There has to be some form of government, hopefully a small government, but a government nonetheless, that maintains control and equality over the whole of the system. As soon as you start talking about anarchy of any kind, you've completely lost me.
Now, if we're going by these mainstream definitions of libertarianism and socialism, then calling yourself a libertarian socialist would indeed be an oxymoron.
But anybody you talk to is going to think in terms of those mainstream definitions. Hence, you are, indeed, referring to yourself by a name that is oxymoronic.
You can't simultaneously advocate increasing and reducing the role of the state in the management of the economy. That just doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. No more than it makes sense to invent your own definitions of existing terms and pretending that anybody is going to either understand or care about your new definitions.
However, and this is the important part, libertarian socialists are not using these mainstream definitions.
Well, that just means that libertarian socialists, in addition to having a ridiculous political philosophy, don't understand how language works. And that's not much of a surprise there.
When we say we want socialism, we don't mean state management of the economy.
So when you say you want socialism, you don't actually want socialism. Got it.
And when we say we want libertarianism, we don't mean management of the economy by private corporations.
And when you say you want libertarianism, you don't actually want libertarianism. Sure, makes perfect sense to me.
So what do we want? Well, for libertarian socialists, socialism is an economic system in which the means of production, so factories, farms, offices, etc., are owned and managed not by the state, but by the workers themselves. We want worker self-management of industry through direct democratic, non-hierarchical federations.
Then what you're talking about is not socialism, it's communism. Get your definitions right.
As in the Spanish Revolution of 1936.
Which was an anarchist movement that utterly failed. So you want to pursue a failed political ideology which has never been successfully implemented and has never produced positive results. Wow, I guess you are closer to libertarians than you thought.
This is contrasted with state management of industry, as in the USSR, China, Cuba, etc.
You are aware that socialism is supposed to be a midway point between capitalism and communism, right? I mean, socialism was never intended to be an independent political ideology on its own.
For libertarian socialists, libertarianism refers to a generalized skepticism towards authority and social hierarchy, and we view the state, like capitalism, as an unjust form of hierarchy. Unlike state socialists, libertarian socialists reject the idea of establishing socialism through political parties.
So you reject establishing non-socialism through the only means that any nation on the planet actually establishes anything. Gotcha. Because you know what political parties are, right? They're just groups of people that share a political ideology who join forces to push their political agenda. The larger the group, the more influence they have. And I guess that means that all the libertarian socialists in the world would fill a small Motel 6.
Whether that means reformist political parties which seek to build socialism by gradually implementing social democratic policies, or whether that means so-called revolutionary vanguard parties.
Then you don't understand how humans work, which seems to be common among a lot of these tiny political movements. People typically join together with others with similar views. That makes you a political party. A ridiculous small and impotent one to be sure, but you are a political party.
We favour direct democracy as opposed to representative democracy.
Cool. Show us anything else that has succeeded. Show us one established nation on the planet that has ever successfully used libertarian socialism and been prosperous. Please give me an example of libertarian socialism that has been shown to be competitive against capitalism. Or communism if you want. I don't care. Whatever works for you. You won't be able to do it because nobody in their right mind would ever implement your crazy political ravings. And that's the thing. If you look at a lot of these lunatic ideas, who are they pushed by? Children. People with very little direct real-world political experience. They are people who just don't know any better. They let their emotions run away with them and say, wouldn't it be great if things just worked like this? Ignoring or being ignorant of the fact that that's not how the world works. I mean, I knew somebody a very, very long time ago who was an ardent anarcho-capitalist. He was certain that if we just got rid of all the governments and governing bodies, that the world would somehow come up with a form of currency that would be accepted by everyone and somehow would have a consistent value regardless of where the transactions were being done. How would this work without any kind of government body to ensure it? He had no idea, but it was going to happen, damn it. These people are ridiculous.
So what does libertarian socialism mean in a nutshell? Well, we view both corporate capitalism and state socialism as failures. We reject the capitalist system and we also reject the state.
But you have no other system that demonstrably works. All you have is wishful thinking that nobody in their right mind would actually accept.
The socialist component is that we believe that workplaces ought to be managed and owned by the workers themselves, rather than by the state or by capitalists.
Collectivism doesn't work. Even in places where the company is supposedly owned by the workers, there are still employees and there are bosses. And the employees work for the bosses, which keep the company operating profitably. I mean, seriously, how many full-time jobs do you think this guy has ever had in his life? None? It's no wonder he has no clue what's going on. Come on back in 20 years when you have a family to feed and a mortgage to pay and let us know about all this stupid libertarian socialist garbage.
The libertarian component is that we have a generalized skepticism towards authority and hierarchy, and we don't like using the state as a means to achieve our goals.
Sorry, that's how humans work. There are leaders and there are followers. Some are better at one than the other. That's life. The idea that we're going to throw out tens of thousands of years of human development because your immature little brain doesn't like how the world works is just ridiculous.
These are the two central positions advocated by libertarian socialists, and when you put them together, they're not contradictory. Now, you might think, oh, well, that's all well and good, but why do you call yourselves libertarian socialists in the first place? Given that these terms are contradictory when they're used in mainstream political discourse, doesn't that just confuse a lot of people? And yes, it does. But we still use these terms anyway because A, we were first, B, it makes sense, and C, it can be explained in under 5 minutes anyway.
But who's going to give you that 5 minutes to explain yourselves? That's like running up to someone on the street and saying you're a serial killer, but if only they'd give you 5 minutes to explain what you mean by serial killer and what the mainstream means by serial killer, then they wouldn't be afraid of you. 'Cause yeah, that's going to go over well. And the idea that you were there first isn't impressive. Being gay used to mean you were happy. Today, it means something else. So I dare you to go to the Middle East, run up to the closest group of radical fundamentalist Muslims, and tell them you're gay. Go ahead. Hope you like getting thrown off roofs.
The word libertarian was first used in a political sense by French philosopher and anarcho-communist Joseph de Jacques in a letter he wrote criticising Pierre-Joseph Proudhon for his sexist views. Throughout most of Europe, the word libertarian was used not to describe free market capitalists, but instead anti-state, anti-capitalists. The pro-capitalist usage is relatively unique to the heart of the evil empire. Britain and the United States.
But isn't it funny that you choose to live there, right? But that's because you have no money and you have no life skills. You're just a high school or college student that thinks you got all this shit figured out. The only things you've got figured out are jack and shit.
And is a relatively recent phenomenon. In The Betrayal of the American Right, laissez-faire capitalist Murray Rothbard openly acknowledges the fact that libertarianism was originally a leftist phenomenon.
That's not exactly something to be proud of. Regardless of what libertarianism, or socialism for that matter, used to mean, what it means right now is all that matters. The whole idea that we own this word is stupid and childish. You just waste your time trying to explain things to people who probably aren't interested in the first place, rather than being able to make your points with regards to your philosophy. But again, children!
He said, one gratifying aspect of our rise to some prominence is that, for the first time in my memory, we, our side, had captured a crucial word from the enemy. Libertarians had long been simply a polite word for left-wing anarchists, that is, for anti-private property anarchists, either of the communist or syndicalist variety. But now we had taken it over. We don't see why we should change our terminology just because right-wing yuppies try to appropriate it. We still use the word socialist to describe our economics because, well, that's what they are.
Well, never mind that socialism has never worked in the history of this planet over the long term.
Workers' control is a form of common ownership, and common ownership is socialism. Socialism has come to mean social democracy or Marxism-Leninism because throughout most of the 20th century, most of the left didn't pursue libertarian methods and instead advocated taking state power. The libertarian socialists historically have always been suppressed by social democrats and Leninists.
That's because they were more successful in the real world, if you can consider what's happened in socialist states to be successful. We know that it doesn't work because every time it's been tried, it's had to move from socialism to capitalism because socialism by itself is a complete failure.
Thus, the word socialism has come to mean varying degrees of state management of the economy, despite the fact that non-state forms of socialism do exist. The most salient examples would be the Spanish Revolution of 1936, the Free Territory of Ukraine, and in Ours to Master and to Own, Emmanuel Ness gives an overview of workers' control, ranging from the Paris Commune right the way up into the present day.
Now, show us any of those that existed long-term and were as successful as any capitalist system. Oh wait, you can't do that because all of them were utter failures. At best, they were short-lived third world countries, and at worst, they simply fell apart into chaos. That's a really great system you're advocating there.
Libertarian socialism is not an oxymoron, it's a real, legitimate political philosophy and movement which has existed for hundreds of years.
Ideologically, not in practice, because nobody in their right mind would ever put it into practice on a large scale.
The problem is, and the reason for all of these misunderstandings, is that it's just not talked about.
Because it makes no sense. And it's always the problem with these crazy ideological movements that when something goes wrong, when they don't work as advertised, they always point fingers and make crazy conspiracy theories for why it wasn't their fault. Somebody else has to be to blame.
Because numerous authoritarian institutions, such as the nation-state and private corporations, see it as being a threat to their authority.
And isn't it funny how they have plenty of money and power and influence to smash the little guy? I mean, if libertarian socialism is so much better than capitalism, why is it that libertarian socialism isn't more powerful? Why is it they don't have more money and more influence to keep from being pushed around? Explain that one to us.
And thus will do everything they can to suppress it.
Seriously, if this is meant to impress me, it's failed. It comes off as a movement for ignorant children who have no real-world experience because it would simply never work in the real world. It's just a fantasy for people who wouldn't know reality if it bit them in the ass. And to protect their ridiculous ideology, instead of recognizing its inherent weaknesses, they come up with these grand conspiracy theories why they just can't get anywhere. It's not their fault. Everybody's out to get them. They post stupid YouTube videos as a means of convincing the masses, but the masses think they're stupid, and they still don't get anywhere. I'm sure they have a conspiracy theory explaining that one too. Crazy people are like that. They always have a good tale waiting for when somebody criticizes their delusions. And libertarian socialism is nothing more than a delusion. It's a failed concept that its adherents don't want to accept has fallen apart. And I guess that's not a surprise.